Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is going to be my January reading wrap up. I finished 7 books in the month of January, so let's just get right into it. The first book I read was an audiobook that my local library was promoting. They were doing like a book club thing, and that was V by Kim Tui. I ended up rating this a 6.5 out of 10, but most of that is completely on me. I went into this with completely the wrong expectations. I guess I misunderstood what the book was about, and it kind of affected my enjoyment a lot. This is a historical fiction novel about a young Vietnamese girl whose family is torn apart by the Vietnam War, and most of her family then escapes to Canada, and her father stays behind, and it's kind of just her life and her experience. And while I think I would have liked the book a lot more if I would have known going into it, for some reason I didn't realize that it was going to be so short. It's apparently a somewhat companion novel. Kim Tui writes other stories of kind of brief snapshots of other like immigrants and other people's similar experiences, and they're meant to be kind of like a brief shot and overview kind of thing, but I didn't realize that going into it. I kind of expected it to be more like memoir style. I guess I kind of kept waiting for like an explanation or for things to tie together, and that's not what this book was supposed to be. That was just my, I don't know if it was a misinterpretation of what I had originally read as the synopsis, I don't remember, or if I just got into my head that was what the book was supposed to be and then was confused when it wasn't. So for my enjoyment, I rated it like a 6.5 out of 10, but don't take that rating too seriously, because I feel like if you go into the book knowing what it is, it's going to be a lot more enjoyable. And a lot of the parts I really did enjoy. It was really interesting to see kind of how each member of her family kind of dealt with things and just how certain things evolved. But it was a really short book, so there really wasn't that much to go off of, and yeah, it was good, so take my rating with a grain of salt. After that, I know that I said I wanted to prioritize my physical TBR this year, but then I noticed that my library had the first 3 Diviners books on audiobook all available at the same time, so I decided to challenge myself to see if I could finish all 4 Diviners books within a week, and I did that. So I read the 4 books in the Diviners series by Libba Bray. I want to talk about them all together because I'm not going to go into the synopsis for the later books anyways. But I gave the first book, The Diviners, an 8.5 out of 10. I gave the second book, Layer of Dreams, a 7.5 out of 10. I gave the third book, Before the Devil Breaks You, a 7 out of 10. And I gave the fourth book, The King of Crows, a 7.5 out of 10. So the series was fine, but I didn't absolutely love it. Trigger warnings though for sexual assault, abusive relationships, animal abuse, specifically killing cats for like a ritual reason, homophobia, racism, human experimentation, primarily in book 3, child abuse in book 3, and plague and pandemic in book 2. I mostly enjoyed these books. They were fine, but I didn't love them. I did think that the like setting and like the 1920s lingo was very heavy-handed, but honestly I kind of liked that. And also I was reading it on audiobook, and the audiobook narrator did such an amazing job. It was narrated by January Lavoie, and I'm going to be looking up their other books that they narrate because it was incredible, and it really made the like lingo and all of the like atmosphere really feel very natural. It didn't make all of the like language and expressions and sayings feel out of place at all when it was narrated that way. So I just felt like that made a really big difference. So if you can listen to the audiobook, I definitely recommend it for this series. I did like the characters for the most part. I feel like the cast was a little bit too big at times, but I still really enjoyed most of them. My biggest complaint is that I just felt like a lot of the subplot wasn't interesting enough to me. I wasn't invested, and primarily in book 3, there's a lot of like ghost hunting that I just couldn't care less about. Like I just felt like we were wasting time and kind of spinning our wheels away from the main plot. And by the time the book finished, I just wanted to know like the mystery. I just wanted to know the answer. I didn't even care the journey to get there. I just wanted to be like, okay, no, like just tell me, I'm done. And honestly, the conclusion was fine, but it definitely wasn't worth 4 books for me. I feel like the 4 books also had kind of distinct, like there's the overarching plot, but each book's like main subplot was pretty different, and I feel like it would have either done better as just a duology and cut out most of that subplot, or been like a long companion series where it's like the same characters following different like mysteries or something like that. Like I don't know, I just didn't think that a 4-book series and this really worked for me. So it was fine, but it's definitely not a book that's going to stick with me. After that, I finally did get to a book I physically own, and that was Meat Market by Juno Dawson, and I gave this a 9 out of 10. This is the story of Jana, and she is very like androgynous looking, and she's always felt really awkward and uncomfortable in her skin. And then she is at this like fair or carnival with her friend, and this modeling agent discovers her and she gets swept away and she's this mega sensation, etc, etc. I will say trigger warnings for drug abuse, eating disorders, a lot of focus on body image, a few trans slurs, sexual assault, sexual harassment, statutory rape, and victim blaming. This book really explores all of the dark underbelly of the modeling and fashion worlds. And I've said this before, but Juno Dawson does such an amazing job at dark, ugly worlds. Like with the other book I read from her, Clean, it's about a rich socialite who gets sent to rehab, and it just was such a great snapshot of just anger and bitterness and just really amazing. And this book has a lot of very similar vibes, even though the plot's completely different. I do appreciate though that she didn't just say, hey, the beauty world is terrible and toxic and I hate it all. Like, obviously it gets a lot of, I think, deserved criticism in the fashion and modeling and beauty industry. Like, it's an industry that is primarily built on insecurities, and I think that there's a lot of people in those industries that exploit that and exploit people, and there is a lot of toxic problems in those communities. But it's not just inherently evil. It's not everybody being a terrible person out to get you. Like, Jana struggles a lot with the world and with the thoughts of a lot of people around her, but she's having fun too. And there are a lot of really nice people and a lot of people that are really advocating for the self-acceptance and for the self-expression and the artistic style of things. And I feel like a lot of stories that kind of tackle this kind of thing are either very one side or the other. And I think that this book definitely does a good job of showing both sides, but not shying away from anything. Nothing in here is sugar-coated, but she doesn't hide the fact that there are some positives in what's going on. And I just found this book really fascinating. I love Juno Dawson's writing style. I think that it just lends itself really well to this type of story. There was a lot of, like I would say, like London slang that was a little bit jarring at first just because it's not what I'm used to, but I found that it really made the book feel authentic, so it wasn't that bad. And like I said, you do have to suspend your disbelief for a little bit because, you know, she gets discovered and not all of a sudden huge and etc, etc. But, you know, it's a fiction story. Like I said, this book does very much focus on body image and about weight and controlled eating and just all the things that go along with that. So if that's at all triggering for you, I would definitely not recommend this book because that is very much the forefront of this. But aside from that, I would recommend this book. I thought it was really fun. If you like kind of darker takes on things, I think that Juno Dawson is an amazing author. Meat Market, like I said, a 9 out of 10. And speaking of dark and uncomfortable books, the final book I read was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I gave this an 8.5 out of 10. The story takes place half in the past and half in the present. And in the past, she is a teenager who's in a relationship with one of her teachers, one of her professors. And in the present, the teacher is now being accused of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and she's kind of coming to terms with what she thought was a fine consensual relationship that she's now realizing may actually be abusive. And it's a very dark story, and it's very uncomfortable at times. Definite trigger warnings for sexual abuse, abusive relationships, statutory rape, and a lot of victim blaming. One thing that I really liked about the dual timelines is that because you see so much in the present, you know what's going to happen and you know what's unfolding. And also just because you know the synopsis, like you know that this relationship is not okay. You know that even though she thinks it's consensual, she's being manipulated, and when she's that young, she does not have the ability to consent, especially with an adult who's in a position of power. But she doesn't see it that way, and you're in her head, so you're watching her rationalize this, and you know that it's wrong, and you know what's happening, but you're just watching it happen, and it's very uncomfortable in, I would say, a good way. If you like dark and uncomfortable books, this is very enjoyable for that. I hesitate saying the word like enjoyable for something like this, but I hope you know what I mean. Another thing is that while I have never been in this scenario, I've been in a situation that I'm not going to go into, but a lot of her thoughts were so familiar, and I had to kind of stop a couple times or like pause and just kind of process some things, I guess. even now that she's an adult and she's thinking, okay, well maybe it wasn't an entirely appropriate relationship, but it wasn't that bad, it wasn't abuse, it wasn't this, it wasn't that, and because you saw it in the moment and like the first time that they had sex and she doesn't want to, but she's rationalizing to herself, she's like, well, I did go along with it, so no, that wasn't rape. Like, yeah, I said no, but like I didn't make him stop, so it was fine. And that's not fine. Like, it's not fine at all, but just being in her head and watching her rationalize this and watching basically her being unable to process so much trauma is really, really difficult. And I just feel like this book does such a good job at making you understand so well how the character thinks and being able to understand why she's thinking the way she does and why she does the same things, but at the same time adamantly disagreeing with it. I don't know, it was kind of like helping me process some things because I'm watching this character go through it and I'm an outsider in this situation, and you know, I can think rationally and I'm like, no, I can see that you're wrong, but her echoing thoughts that I've had myself kind of helped me take a step back and realize like, huh, maybe I've also been wrong. And I don't know, I just think that this book did a lot. It was very heavy. It took me a really long time to rate this book. Like I really had to sit down and objectively, okay, how did I like the setting? How did I like the plot? How did I like the characters? How did I like the writing? And find a rating from that, because I just had too hard of a time deciding on a rating. But I landed on an 8.5 out of 10. And there we have it. Those are the 7 books that I read this month. And honestly, I'm just happy that I managed to read 7 books because I pretty much always start every new year in a reading slump. I just get a lot of pressure on myself and I just get overwhelmed. So even though there are a lot of them where they're only mediocre for me, I'm still really happy with that, and it was a good way to kind of get me into the swing of reading again. So that is going to be all for today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, please click the like button to let me know, and subscribe to stay up to date with the rest of my videos. I post new videos every Wednesday and Sunday, usually reading or writing related. So I hope to see you guys next time, and until then, have a great day. Bye!